Welcome to It Depends, the podcast for therapists by therapists. I'm your host, Dr. Joy Zolakowski, and this is the place where nuance lives. Each week, I sit down with a fellow mental health professional to talk about the lessons we wish we knew when we started, the clinical moments that changed us, and the wisdom we carry now. This isn't a how-to, it's not a highlight reel, it's the honest, messy, meaningful conversations we don't always get to have. Whether you're just starting out or decades into the work, you'll find real talk, shared humanity, and space for the questions we all come back to. What's the right answer? Well, it depends. Let's get into it. Dr. Whitney Crowson is an experienced licensed clinical psychologist with a demonstrated history of working in the mental health field. She specializes in child sexual abuse, human sex trafficking, forensic psychology, complex trauma, crisis intervention, and psychological assessment. Dr. Crowson maintains a professional license in the state of Texas and has several certifications to practice therapeutically and forensically in her field of expertise. She has conducted over 200 professional trainings and has been an invited guest speaker to both local and national conferences, including the 2023 TDCAA Prosecuting Crimes Against Children Conference, 2021 Annual Crisis Intervention Training for Katy ISD Police Officers, and the 2021 Northwest Regional ICAC Conference in Seattle, Washington. In addition to crisis intervention and internet crimes against children, Dr. Crowson has trained local law enforcement on the dynamics of sexual abuse, effects of childhood trauma, and characteristics of sex offenders. Given her extensive education and specialized training and experiences, Dr. Crowson also regularly serves as an expert witness for the Harris County District Attorney's Office in criminal cases regarding childhood trauma and sexual assault. All right, everybody, welcome to the It Depends podcast. Today I have Dr. Whitney Crowson with me, who I am very, very lucky to call a colleague and also a wonderful friend. And Whitney, I would love to hear from you. Like, who are you?
Hello. So I know we're here to talk about how we got to where we are. So first I'll just tell you who I am. So I am a clinical psychologist in Houston, Texas. I work primarily at a child advocacy center. I also have I have a side gig too, but primarily at a child advocacy center. So I work with children and families after there have been allegations of child sexual abuse. And then so half of my job is doing mental health work, trainings, things like that. And then the other half is providing expert testimony in crimes against children. And so that's also what my side hustle is, if you will. I do testimony in other counties throughout Texas. So some call me a clinical psychologist, others call me a forensic psychologist. I just kind of don't know where to how to combine those two, actually. But I consider myself a clinical psychologist who provides forensic services.
What do you see, like, is there a difference between forensic psychologist and clinical psychologist?
Well, I say that because I know these days there are those forensic psychology specialty areas that you get in grad school. That was not there when I was going through grad school. So I don't know how different that is. And I don't really know what that training looks like. I do know that, or I believe it is more of a clinical lens with a forensic touch to it. But at this point, throughout my career, I think I've probably gained all of that experience and knowledge just on my own. But I feel strange saying I'm a forensic psychologist just because that's not what my specialty degree was in school. But I'm probably the same exact thing.
Fair. Totally fair. So what does one have to do to get to where you are today?
One does not have to do as much as I did to get to where I am, but I did not know what I wanted to do. So I'm not sure how far back you want me to go. I didn't never even plan on graduating college when I went. I planned on just having fun. That was my whole goal, was just to have fun. I was going to get married to someone rich and not have to work ever in my life. But I truly did not plan on graduating with a bachelor's degree. Then I found psychology and just kind of fit. It was my niche, I guess you could say. And then I guess I'm just supposed to be honest here, right? So I'd never heard of grad school. And so when someone told me, don't go into psychology, you'll have to spend 10 years in school, I thought, who couldn't do this for 10 years? I just thought it was 10 years of undergrad fun. You know, I was like, Yeah, please sign me up. So I did that. And then along the way, I realized that that is not what it is. But by that time, I'd actually found something I was good at. And I had never really found that before. And so it drew me in. And so I still have never been married, but I do have 4 degrees. And so life just kind of flipped from what I expected it to be to what it is now.
No, I think it's actually really important that people hear that experience because I think for many myself, there was I don't know that I had a formal plan, but the expectations where you go to college, you graduate, you go to graduate school in whatever field it was that you did, and then you got a career. Like I didn't even know that there was an option to do anything different. And I guess what I'm hearing from you is that you didn't even know that was a track that you could go on, and I think others are probably in that same space.
Yeah, I think I always heard of it as sort of like a backup plan to being married and having a family. And if your husband were to leave you, you need to have a degree to fall upon. But that was really the goal. Like you have this backup plan. And so it just never really occurred to me. And I don't know if my parents intended on it to sound that way, but that's how it always felt. But I think not knowing what grad school was, never even hearing about it, is probably shows that that is exactly the message they were giving me. But yeah, it was always get married, have children, but don't forget that school is there, and you need to have this degree so that you can have something to fall back on if you ever need it. But maybe that's why I didn't take it so seriously. I mean, they wanted me to go to school, but I never really heard really reasons why other than that. I mean, my mom, by the time I was in high school, my mom was a stay-at-home mom. My dad had his own business, and so he had a degree, and he had a bachelor's at the time. Since I've gone to school, they've both gone back to school, and now we're all just in school. But he's gotten a graduate degree since then. But growing up, he had a degree in writing. He was a technical writer for a long time, and then went out on his own and was building houses. So there wasn't a lot of like this learned like background of my parents. It wasn't like school was a big topic except to just finish it. That was it.
It's interesting that you say like the idea was that you got a degree so that you could be independent in case your marriage didn't work out. I don't think my parents ever said that explicitly, but I remember hearing from my mom several times that you need to have these things set up for yourself so that you don't have to rely on a man to support you. And I
Mm-hmm.
think the unspoken part was because you will be in that situation one day and you will have a partner and they could leave or they could not treat you well, and so you need to be prepared. Not because you would find a career fulfilling
Mm-hmm.
in any other way.
Yeah. Well, and also to be fair, I never really gave the impression that I would succeed at anything. So I don't really know that they believed I would or could. I know they just thought I always wanted to have fun. And my dad, I'll never forget, was yelling at me and he just told me, you cannot get through life having fun. And that was the moment I think I was hell bent on proving that you could get through life having fun. And so not only was I going to school, but I was having fun. I was having a lot of fun. But I think, as long as like their teaching did help me to like know I should always be progressing in some way, like moving forward, whether it's straightforward or like a little bit to the side or like whatever. I'm just moving. I'm doing something and not just staying still and becoming stagnant. And so even when I was getting my first master's degree, I wasn't planning on using it ever. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but at least I was moving forward. I was doing something. But and also there was a lot of tragedy in my first. Do you want me to go into that maybe a little bit? Like,
If you want to share, sure.
so this will age me, but my first semester in college was when 9/11 hit, right? So that I was in school to be a reporter. I was going to be a news anchor because why not? And so I was doing that, but then I realized those were not my people, right? And then I had a few other shifts that led me to psychology, and so I did that. Well, then I had started grad school in August of 2005. Well, then Katrina hit during that time, and I'm from Louisiana, so that was very disruptive to me, and I was not doing well with that. So I had to take a break after the first semester. And everyone told me not to. Everyone said if you take a break, you'll never come back. And as this stubborn human that I always was, and like this very independent, I need to know for myself type of person, I was like, you know what, this is what I need, and so I got what I need. And I went down to New Orleans. I helped my dad rebuild some places, and I just got away for a little bit. And once I felt fine, I came back. I got back into school, and I started in a new program. So I just pretend that first little semester of grad school didn't exist. And so I just started fresh somewhere else.
Oh,
And
I didn't realize you had switched. What was your original program?
it was at Northwestern. But then I was just like, I just like wiped it clean. Like, I'm just going to take that away. And so I started at Louisiana Tech after that. And I don't really ever report that I went to Northwestern for grad school
I
because
didn't realize.
I
Yeah.
didn't really, I really didn't, you know. And so then I did my first master's at Louisiana Tech, but it was a counseling and guidance program. I didn't really want to do therapy. I thought that would be boring, and I just didn't want to listen to people's problems all day. Like that was truly how I felt at the time. And so, but then I got to do some rotations in a correctional facility and two different rotations in a psychiatric hospital, and that's when I really just started to love the field. And so it was when I was working at the rotating, I guess, through the psychiatric hospital. Um, they ended up giving me a job, and so I worked there. And I wanted to do all these other things I wasn't allowed to do because I didn't have a clinical degree. So I went back to school in Florida, where I met you, and just started that, started that program. And then when I got into that clinical program, I realized like that was really what I was wanting the whole time. Like that's what I was really hungry for, I guess you could say. But the first program that I did in Louisiana Tech, my first master's, it really helped to prep me for that program. So I'm glad I did it. You don't have to do all these different things, but I'm glad I did it because it gave me 2 years of instruction as well as on-site experience, so that when I got into the clinical program, I was really prepared for that, and things were able to come to life for me. It wasn't just textbook nonsense, it was actual life, and I could put cases that I'd actually seen into play. So I've always been really interested as well in abnormal psychology. And so I always figured I would work with those who are the most vulnerable, which are either criminally insane or children. Anywhere in between there, I kind of feel like you can deal with your own stuff. And I'm glad that there are therapists for people in the middle, because I'm one of those people in the middle who need a therapist. But that's the only one. Like those are the only groups I really wanted to work with because they seemed like the most challenging.
Those ones
And
really excited you.
yeah, yeah. And I get really bored really easily. Um, just with everything. And so I needed something to keep my interest going and not be this mundane, type of mundane to me, not to to those who do it. They may absolutely love it, and that's great. We all have our niche, but then I just kind of fell into what I'm doing now.
Just a side thing, and I can obviously I'll edit this out. Is it okay to ask you about being neurodivergent, or would you prefer not to?
I don't mind it. I don't know how to talk about it. I don't know how to. I'm not as familiar with the language. I am who I am, and I can talk about me.
Well, so I want to ask you about having ADHD and how that impacts you as a clinician. How do you deal with it? But I also
Mm,
don't want to blow your shit up if that's not something you want to
mm.
publicly share.
No, I don't care.
Okay. Okay. So you you mentioned what you do now, and working with children and doing these assessments and therapy. What is it that you do now? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so like I said, I work at an advocacy center. We see kids and families after there have been allegations of sexual abuse. So my role, once they come here, they have a forensic interview, which I actually used to do. I'm certified in forensic interviewing and in extended forensic evaluation. And I got this.
Sorry to interrupt you for a moment. For those of us who don't know the difference,
Oh,
what is the difference between a clinical interview or an intake and a forensic interview?
okay, very different. So a clinical interview is what you would do for therapy, right? You do the intake and that kind of stuff. A forensic interview is an interview you do with someone, or here you would do it with a child. It's forensically sound. It's semi-structured, and the goal of it is to talk about the allegations they have disclosed already, and really hopefully to just get to the truth. These interviews are recorded, they're video and audio recorded. I have a room next to each of the forensic interview rooms that have monitors that police, like law enforcement or CPS or attorneys, whomever might be on the case, can sit in those rooms and watch on the monitors what's happening in the forensic interview room. And then whenever we are near the end of the forensic interview, we go and we discuss, is there anything I missed out on, or is there anything I skipped over? And then they can tell us where to fill in the gaps, go back in with the child and do that. I did that for about 4.5 years when I came here. I supervised a little bit, but I was really full-time therapist or psychologist. So towards the end, they only pulled me in on like the high-profile or media cases that were difficult, and then it just kind of fizzled out. And so now I don't do that anymore. But the reason was in the beginning that I was doing it is because it was part of our internship program. So I was matched here for internship. And so that was part of our program, and we had to have that to finish our internship, that kind of thing.
And so, for folks who aren't as familiar with the doctoral process, doctoral programs are usually 4 to 7 years, depending on what kind of classes you take and what kind of externship and practicum opportunities you have. After you've finished your classwork, you have to do a match process, which is very similar to what MDs do. So you apply all over the country. They interview you. You also decide what you like, and then you rank them, they rank you, and there's a whole match process, which I've whittled down to less than 30 seconds, but is actually quite invasive and
Yes.
extreme and also very costly. So then you do your what we call an internship, which is 1 full-time year of clinical work where you are supervised. Once you have completed your classwork, your internship, and defended your dissertation, you may graduate with your program with a doctorate. So you get your PhD or your PsyD, and then you have to do usually another 2 years of supervised experience, which is called a postdoc. And then you would apply for licensure. You have to take a test, do all the things. And that's when you can actually call yourself a psychologist, once you have done all of those things and you have your license in hand. So when Whitney is talking about her internship experience, that she's talking about that match process and where she ended up there.
Yes. Yeah. So, so that's how I ended up here and why I was getting certified in those areas. So now, okay, so back to when our kids make these allegations, they come here first, they get forensically interviewed, they get a forensic medical exam, which we also have on site. We have a medical clinic. They do the forensic exam, medical exam, and then they are offered therapy. They can say no or whatever, but if they want therapy, they're referred. So then that's when I get them. And so then what I do now, I do the clinical interview, and then I provide therapy, which could be play therapy. Other therapists here have been certified in EMDR. That's just not my forte, so I have not been certified in that. But I got certified in trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, and I'm currently getting certified in the neurosequential model of therapeutics, which is Dr. Bruce Perry's work. If any of you are familiar with it, it's fantastic. But essentially, it talks about the sequential development of the brain, and how trauma or distressing events in early childhood affect that development over the course of your lifetime. And so that's what I do. So I provide therapy, I provide psych testing when necessary. The therapy here can be individual, group, or family therapy. We also provide like caregiver groups. And then I do trainings. I do trainings for our students. I do trainings for law enforcement. I do trainings now for attorneys, but that's mostly as my side gig. So I do trainings at attorneys conferences and things. Let's see, for like child advocates, nurses, sometimes grand juries come in and they want information on certain topics. Also, there are times where if there's like a high media case, I'll be asked. I begrudgingly do those interviews for the news. Every time I do one, I say I will never do it again because I can't stand them, and they show like a blip of what you say, and they leave all the really good stuff out and just show the most ridiculous part. So I always say I'm never going to do it again, but of course when they ask me, I say, yeah, sure, tell me what else you need me to do. And so I do them. But so those are all the things I do here, and also in this field or with this population, there aren't too many of us that stick with it for very long. And so actually I've only been here about 11 years and I'm one of the senior members. I mean, people rotate in and out. It just either is your thing or it's not. I 100% believe that it is just what I'm meant to be doing. And so I love it, and it gives me joy and it gives me energy. And I think anyone who does work needs to be energized by their work and just really enjoy it. And so that's what I'm doing. And so I decided to also go out on my own. I make more money in much less time doing a private practice, but I actually really love doing what I'm doing here, and the benefits are great. So I stay with it here. But I do love what I do. I really, really enjoy it.
I think for a lot of us, there's a calling at some point, and you
Yeah.
figure out what that calling is, and when you get it, it's like, all right, this isn't work.
Yeah,
Uh,
right. And for me, so okay, so some of us have a clear calling, like they know it, right? I did not. And from my like from the jump, first of all, I never imagined myself working for a living. That just wasn't what I dreamed of as a kid. I don't know what I dreamed of. I just didn't dream of having a job. I never knew what I was going to be when I grew up. And along the way, just about everything I thought I wanted has been laughed at by the world. Like essentially growing up, I just was kind of rebellious. I just did what I felt was right for me. And even when someone told me that it wasn't right for me, I was like, well, you don't know me. I know me. And so I would do what I felt was right for me. And sometimes I was wrong and sometimes I was right. Well, in college, like I did the psychology thing, number one, because it felt good. I felt like I knew what I was doing in it. And I thought I would get to stay in undergrad for 10 years. So, hey, I really thought it was a road to party, but it turned out not to be that way. But then again, so whenever I needed to drop out for a semester, everyone told me not to, but I knew I needed to do that. And I didn't know what I was going to do after. I just followed my gut and I did it. And then it turns out that was right for me. Then I go on to do my my doctorate, and I never wanted to work with kids. I didn't want to do therapy, and I didn't want to work with kids.
yeah.
Here we are. And the thing is, I learned adults, how long ago was that? Yikes. Almost 20 years ago, did not see me as an adult because I looked like a child. So, and it's okay. I was okay to explain my credentials and my experience and my ability, but they adults just couldn't get past it. So I thought, well, fine. So I started working with kids, and kids loved me. They thought that I wasn't one of those adults, and it was just easy for them to open up to me. And I thought, well, okay, so maybe this is what I should be doing. And so I finally was like, okay. So I did that. And then when I was going through the match process that you were just talking about, I was interviewing at all these places. When I interviewed here, of course, I looked at everything online. I wanted to know everything about them so I could maybe be a step ahead and know what they're doing and what I should say. And somehow or another, I never noticed that it was about child sexual abuse. I knew we worked with kids, obviously, at the Children's Assessment Center, but it wasn't until I ranked them number one that one of our colleagues was like, so what'd you rank? So I told him, and he said to me, oh, I thought about that, but I didn't want to work with child sexual abuse all the time. And I was like, that's not what it is. And he goes, Whitney, that is 100% what it is. And I said, no, I wouldn't have chosen that. That's not what I would have chosen. And come to find out, that is 100% what it is. And so I don't know what blinded me or deafened me to what we do here, but something did, because that power knew that if I were to know what it was, I wouldn't have ranked it. And I do believe I was supposed to be here. So again, like I still followed my gut. I still, like along the way, did things that I thought were right for me, even when people told me it wasn't right for me. And I landed in the right spot. I never wanted to work with this population. It was never like, well, I want to work with children who've been sexually abused. I did want to work with kids eventually, but that was it. Like if I knew it was 100% child sexual abuse, I would have definitely gotten myself off track. So if you do hear your calling, definitely follow that. But I would also say if you don't hear your calling, don't freak out. Just follow your gut. As long as you're moving in some direction and you're doing what feels right for you, then I would say you're going to land in the right spot.
And I know we talked about this a little bit on the phone the other night, just how both of us ended up in areas that neither one of us thought we would.
Right.
And I think for those of us who have a plan, like that's great and follow your plan, but be flexible and be open to things that maybe are a little deviation from your plan. But I mean, I know I've shared with you, like I was never going to work with eating disorders. That was
Yeah.
not, I thought, oh my gosh, what a difficult population to work with. And then that was the first job I could get out of school. It was the only job I could get with a BA in psych. And here we are again, almost 15 years later. And I'm like, I don't want to do anything else.
Yeah.
But it's not where I saw myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And I always looked just a little bit ahead. Like I know people with 10-year plans. I have never had a 10-year plan. I don't know what I would do with a 10-year plan. I don't even have a 5-year plan. But, I know what I want to do in the next few moments, and I know where I want to be headed, but like even through school, if I would have looked too far in advance, I would have been so overwhelmed. I would have given up. I wouldn't have even attempted it because I'd been told all my life I wasn't going to get very far. I mean, I was voted like most airheaded in school, like an actual award. Okay, I was voted.
I honestly can't
Um,
see it rolling my eyes hard.
yeah, right, right. Most accident prone, like all these things that were like, like all these things that were like, so funny. And they would even put some of my traumatic experiences on tests. Like literally, I had this really horrible experience in a car accident, which had some funny details to it, and it was on a test as extra credit. Like there was details about it, just so everyone could get a laugh. And of course, I laughed along with it, but no one really knew how much it affected me. Like no one did. And I know I've told you before. I can remember all the way back when I was in middle school, the first time when
Mhm.
a teacher tells me, I've never heard a stupid question until now. Like that sits with a person, like you have that. Then you have these awards telling you you're an idiot and you'll never make it. And I've even had people looking at me and being like, wow, after a few minutes of talking, you're smarter than you look. Like, and you just want to be like, I don't really don't know what to say to that. Except, wow, that's very insulting. You think I look stupid, so all
Yeah.
my life, like I've had people telling me you won't make it very far. You just need to like settle with whatever, have a backup plan. This whole idea. But come to find out, like as an adult, I never realized that that class until someone brought it to my attention was like the class where you asked a stupid question was rocket science class. I was literally taking rocket science, and that was where I had the stupid question. And my friend was like, I would offer to venture the idea that no question in that class would be stupid. You're in rocket science, like whatever. But regardless, there were just always these messages that were told to me that you're just, whatever. Like figure out your role because it's not going to be in academia or
Right.
some sort of professional.
And I know we've also chatted about, like, I've had similar experiences. I not relevant to this, but I'm involved in a class action for an organization involved in eating disorders. And the lawyer who's handling this, and I know he thinks very highly of me, so he didn't mean it this way at all. But he mentioned, I really hope they get to depose you because they're never going to see you coming. They're going to take one look at your hair and your piercings and they're going to decide that you're an idiot and they can get you. And he's like, and then they're going to hear you speak. And part of me was like, well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You think so highly of me. But the implication is strongly that people think you look like an idiot.
Mm-hmm.
And that has been similar to you. That has been a constant theme my entire life. Never from my parents, but from other folks in my life. I don't know why that is, but it sounds like it's also been a driving factor for you because I felt like for me, it was like, oh, you think I'm stupid? Well, hold my beer. Let
Yeah,
me,
yeah.
let me show
Right,
you.
right.
Like you've had similar experience with that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And now working a lot in the court system that has not disappointed. It is also there, very much there. And the good thing is I do love to dress up. Okay. So I do have all the clothes ready. I have all my suits. I have all my heels. I have all my everything ready to look the part. But again, they also weren't ready, I think, because I
Mhm.
when I am into something, I obsess over. I enjoy. I love this field. I really do, and I love the literature on it. I read constantly. I'm always reading. I'm always researching and like looking at new things. And I think in order to be one step ahead in court, you have to do that. But the good thing is, I've always loved banter. I've always loved a conversational challenge, and that I think is what people aren't really ready for because not many. I guess many people just in general aren't ready for that, just with anyone. But because I was raised, I had a very interesting, I was raised by by both parents, but my mother was very Emily Post world. Like everything had to be etiquette correct. I had to go to etiquette school, like all the things. So I knew how to come across, and my dad taught me more real world things. But so I go into the courtroom and I'm up for the challenge. Like we're all there for something very serious and we take it very seriously, but our roles and what we're doing, we're all on a stage. It's very
Yeah.
much prescribed. And so knowing that helps me because if you're sitting in that witness stand and you take things personally, you're going to crumble because that's all the defense is doing is trying to, or whoever's on the opposing side, I guess I should say, they're just trying to credit you. They're trying to make you feel like an idiot. They're trying to do all these things that would trigger me in a real world situation. But when I'm on the stand, it's like it all just kind of goes away. And I realize that we're in like this game, sort of like this. I know what you're trying to do, and I'm going to make sure you don't get there, or I'm going to make sure that I have all the information I need ready for you so that I come out ahead. And there have been times where they got me, and I'm like, oh, how do I go from here? But I don't let it get me down. It's a learning experience for me. And I go home and I study it and I learn it. And then I get better at that. But I'm at a point now where it's like, I'm just literally the messenger. I'm not up there giving opinions. It's not my role in most of these situations. If I have not evaluated the complainant or done any kind of testing, then it's not my role to go in there and give opinions. I'm literally just giving you the science and the research. Anyone else could come in here and give you the exact same information. But what's so upsetting to some of the opposing counsel um, is that I don't get my feathers ruffled. I don't let them get me upset or mad, and I stay very calm and polite and kind. And so when they were trying to upset me and they don't, then they get really upset. And I also know a lot of the legal jargon at this point. I did used to get into it a little bit, but and I still sometimes do, especially if there's like new case law that includes me. I'll read it, and then I'll use that in my
Couldn't
like.
read case law that included them in it.
There's all this case law that's all these different cases they're trying to appeal, and they're essentially trying to use something involving me to appeal it. And then it's like whenever the appellate board or whatever they are reject that and say no, that's not the case, it cannot be appealed on that based on all this law, then I read it really really good. And just last week I was in a hearing about my relevancy and if I'm even relevant or whatever, and I was able to use this snippet from case law that they worded, like they put it together beautifully, and I was just able to say it out loud and just get my point across, and it felt really good. But I do dig into all of that. I dig into all the language that people use in that setting, and I just try to do my best at conveying what I need to convey while also adhering to what I know the law is, and just making sure to fight in a way that is respectful and clear.
So I know we've shifted a little bit more into the expert testimony part of your job. What do you do? What is an expert witness?
Okay, so an expert witness, it can look a couple different ways. So in my role here at the CAC, the Children's Assessment Center, it is really just to be an expert. I don't go in and give an opinion. So I go in and I teach the jury essentially what are the dynamics of child sexual abuse, like what is involved in that. And so you would think off the top of my head I could come up with all the underlying topics, the subheadings, but I've done it hundreds of times. But it would be like grooming, like what grooming actually is, what it looks like, what are some techniques, because like in society they have like one or two techniques, but there's really so many techniques of grooming. And the purposes of that. Then I also talk about memory, how trauma affects the memory. What are some trauma symptoms? What are some behaviors or symptoms you might look for if someone's experienced trauma? I also talk about the difference between abuse and trauma. Just because abuse is occurring doesn't mean trauma has occurred, but they're used very synonymously in, I guess, the lay world. Then I also talk about the fight, flight, or freeze response. I also talk about the relationship between the victim and the perpetrator. Oftentimes, according to movies, you would hate that person, right? Or they might be a stranger or whatever. But really, they still love this person. And that love really affects the way they treat them and affects the way they interact with them, which can be confusing. And so sometimes attorneys will try to come in and discredit them by saying, well, they still had a good time with them. There's still these photos that show them smiling together, and try to discredit them in that way. So I'm really coming in with just all this information about the dynamics of abuse, the dynamics of trauma, how the effects of trauma, and how all of these are kind of interwoven in these cases. And so with that, the jury can then take the information I have and apply it to different parts if they believe it's relevant. And they can also say, well, we don't think that's relevant here, and they can see it however they want to see it. I'm not talking specifically about the case or my opinion on the case, because most of the time I have never met the victim or the defendant, so I can't give an opinion on whether or not I think it happened. That would just be unethical, right? There are times, though, during that experience, if there are clinical records and they can't get the therapist to come in, or for some reason they're unavailable or whatever, then I can review the records on the stand. We can talk about the records. I can explain certain things, what certain criteria mean, what this clinical language means, and just help them to make sense of that. And there are other times where the attorneys will have me go over some therapy records off the stand prior to trial. They may think that there's nothing relevant in these therapy records. I may review the records and say there's so many, bless you, excuse me, content. So I just kind of search for anything that could have some psychological implications in the case, and then I get up on the stand and I talk about it. Some of the things that I try to correct on the stand is the myth that false allegations are high, or the myth that coaching exists in a lot of these cases, or things like that. I go and I correct those things according to what research shows us, and and so that is like typically what I do as far as my role here. Now, in my side business, those I actually do some evaluations, because there's this new law, fairly new charge. Instead of serious bodily injury, it's serious bodily injury slash mental injury. And so the mental injury we could say is PTSD. So I'll do testing, and those have really become more like child torture cases. And so I've done testing in those, and in those I will give an opinion based on the testing, and also I'll do a clinical interview with the kid. But I won't do therapy. I'll just do a clinical interview, some testing, and then I'll write a report, and then I will go in and do my regular testimony that is all about the education, and then also add the piece about how it has specifically affected this client and potential problems in the future for this client.
So I'm assuming that you have quite a bit of involvement both with law enforcement and lawyers, DAs, all that stuff. What do those relationships look like for you?
So it's more so with attorneys and I feel very comfortable talking to law enforcement because of I think my relationship with attorneys. So if I have questions on a case, I don't think twice about calling up an investigator and asking questions about it. But that's usually at the request of a client that I'm seeing. Now, with that, I'm not sure what is basic information and what is not. So I'll just, sorry if you already know this. But
Assume that there's
okay.
Go to the basics.
Okay. So within each of the divisions in the DA's office, now I will say this with a caveat. Harris County is one of the largest counties, I think probably in the nation. I mean, it is. We have almost 5 million people in this one county, okay, which is more than the people in the state of Louisiana, So our county operates very differently from many other counties. I mean, it's huge, and we have many, many, many divisions, and we have many, many, many attorneys. And so the way it works here is every division, so the Crimes Against Children division, for instance, has its own investigators, and each division has its own investigators at the DA's office. So in that regard, I also am involved with that law enforcement.
Sure.
But my relationship with them has become a very active, very involved relationship. Before a trial, we will do a pre-trial meeting in which we discuss everything about the case. I say everything within about an hour, unless it's crazy intense. But we discuss the highlights of the case. I will be very honest with them. If I think it's a case that doesn't sound very good, or a case that sounds like there's a lot missing, or I just don't feel comfortable being a part of putting this person in jail for whatever reason, then I will tell them that. I will say, but you're missing a lot of information. I would need this, this, and this to feel comfortable testifying for you. I don't just do what they tell me.
Right.
We definitely learn from each other, and I will say, because of A happening, I can't follow all the way to C or D, with this. I can't get on board with it. I don't even. And I am of the belief that children don't come up with lies about child sexual abuse. Now, children lie, we all lie, but child sexual abuse, for one, the younger the child, they don't even know what that is. So for them to come up with the idea is just preposterous. So I am very much on board with the idea that children don't just make this up. And it's unusual for me to say this case is off. But whenever you do something for long enough, you just, when something's off.
There's a vibe.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something off about it. And so I'll let them know this is why I don't feel comfortable about it. Let me give an example. a child comes to school or tells a parent or someone that they were sexually abused. Now they're like 6 years or 7 years old right now, and they say that they were sexually abused when they were two. That is strange because none of us remember what happened when we were two. Like we don't have verbal abilities at 2 years old to store those memories. So to me, I would just need much more information because that sounds to me like, where did the child get this idea from?
Right. So
Because
it's
it's
not
not
that they're lying or being
right.
untruthful, but there's a lot of missing pieces that might
Yes.
create a more filled out picture that takes people in a different direction.
Right. Yes. And there's just more to it. And with just that, it's just, I don't feel comfortable. Right. And so, and that's just a very brief, like simple example, but there are examples. And that actually helped me on the stand because whenever I'm accused of just coming in here and thinking that all these cases are true and that I'm just in the pocket of the DA, which they don't pay me, by the way, extra, extra. Now, when I work on my side business, they definitely pay me, but they do not pay me extra here because it's part of my role. Like I'm in the pocket of the DA's office and that kind of thing. I get to respond with, actually, I'm not getting paid extra for this. I have declined testifying on certain cases. So I get to say that to them on the stand, and that makes me even look more credible. It's good that those cases have come up, so that I'm able to even do that. But they know that now, and in the beginning, it was a learning process, but they know that they're learning from me, and I'm also learning from them. But it's very much a collaborative process. They don't come in telling me what they need for like me to say or anything. I just ask about the details. Then I say, what do you want me to talk about? And then we have a very like a very rich conversation about the case and about what I think I can provide. I do ask, is there something else you're needing from me, and I can tell you if I can provide it, and what those stipulations may be or what the parameters of that may be. But yeah, so I'm very close with all of them. I talk to them probably on a daily basis because again, each there's probably 20 attorneys in that one division, and each of them have over 100 cases waiting. So I mean, it is incredible the amount of cases that we have here in our county. And like I said, that's not the case in every county, but so many other counties are not near as busy as we are. But
So very
again, yeah, but again, true transparency. I mean, I don't have a family at home, not married. I take care of one plant and I barely do that. And so, like, I have the ability to do that kind of thing and I enjoy doing that. And it gives me purpose. It gives me energy. Just talking about it, I'm sure you can see, I just get excited about it. And so that's really kind of what our relationship looks like. They call me on difficult cases, even if they aren't going to use me in my testimony or use my testimony in their cases. They'll call me and say, hey, this just came up. What do you recommend I do? And I'll help them know how to like pivot or use a technique that might be helpful in rebutting whatever just occurred. They truly do view me as a resource for them. And if I can be there, of course I can't be everywhere all at once. And so there are times where there are 3 trials going on at one time, and I limit myself to 2 a day. So I'm not going to do more than 2 testimonies a day. I've done it before, and you got to know your limits, And so I'll say, hey, well, y'all toss a die, do something, figure out who you're going to have or who's going to have me, but I'm only doing 2, but I'll consult with the other. And I'll even consult with the opposing counsel. I've never turned them down. They've asked me to consult on these cases. They have asked me, what would you say if I ask you this question? And I'll say, well, I would love for you to ask me that question, but it won't be good for you if you ask me that question. And they're like, well, what would you say? And so I'll tell them, and so they won't ask the question. Very much objective. I don't want it to ever look like I'm on either side because I'm really not. I'm really just there to educate the jury.
your role is to give facts and to help people understand the law as it applies to psychology in these
Yes.
scenarios.
Yes, yeah. And so, it's not just child sex crimes. So I also testify in like if there's child homicide and there's like another child in the home, or if there was some strange behaviors of the child who was then deceased, and also child physical abuse, child torture. So I do crimes against children in all realms. Like child explicit sexual material, or I think it's, what is it, CSAM, child sexual abuse material, something like that now. There's all these different acronyms. But those cases don't really go to trial very much. They've consulted with me on those, but whenever it's online abuse or internet crimes, usually those get pleaded out. So those don't really go to trial as often in our area anyway.
So, shifting gears just a sec, some of the stuff that you're talking about is obviously really heavy stuff. How do you help yourself and keep grounded doing this kind of work?
I never really know how to answer that question because I don't think it's really one thing. In the past year, so I've been doing this for 11 years. In the past year, when child torture started becoming a thing, I ended up getting into therapy. Um, with someone who used to specialize in this field and who actually is very close with Dr. Bruce Perry, who I mentioned earlier, who developed the Child Traumatic Network here. I forget the actual name. And so I knew that she would understand what I mean when I say I had a bad day. She would get it. Like it's not that the copier won't work or that there's gossip in the office. I mean, it's truly tough stuff.
Right.
And so, not that those things aren't tough, but
But it's a different
she
level.
had an idea of what I was talking about.
Yeah.
And so that, I guess once you take a child torture case and you testify, it's like they all come to you. And so they started coming to me and I could just feel it in my body. Like it was something that stays with me. I don't know why child sexual abuse doesn't have that effect on me, but the other does. And I think that's part of just knowing what you are meant to be doing, or just like where your strengths are, and where your weaknesses are.
Sometimes we don't have a good reason for why something hits
Yeah.
differently,
Yeah.
but it's the insight into that it is.
Yeah, it just does. Yeah, and I recognize that now. Now I guess I never really consider this to be self-care. I really hate that term, but I am religious at getting my massages. So I get a massage every other week. Sometimes it's every 3 weeks, depending on what's going on in my life. Like if it's too busy and I have to reschedule. But I've been doing that since 2018. I've been getting massages every other week, just about.
People laugh at me, but massage, nails, lashes, and hair,
Yeah.
and those are the things that help me feel it sounds stupid to say grounded, but it helps me feel grounded and put together.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, after this long, I mean, he knows my body better than I know my body. And he can tell me when I've been eating less, when I've been eating better, when I have been, he even reminded me that I had tripped and fallen. He was like, "You did something to your shoulder." And I was like, "No, I didn't." And he's like, "Yes, you did. It looks like you fell forward onto it." And I said, "Oh my gosh, you're right. I did." But he just knows me. And so he knows what I need help with. He knows like where I need help, like just in my body. And he's a personal trainer too. And he works with like professional athletes. And so he's not just a feel good spa therapist. I mean, he is truly a massage therapist. Like truly. There are times where I'm in so much pain with what he's doing, but it's better, right? And I know that he's there for me and he's doing it for me.
I'm
And
like, if
so
I'm not feeling it like that, I feel like I didn't really get it.
yeah, yeah, and he gives me exercises to do. I mean, he really works with me. And so that is something that I have maintained. If you can afford it, it's one thing. I've had to like give up other things for me to afford him to do that, but I've done it, right? And now I'm in therapy, mental health therapy, but I do that probably like every other week. And then I always have a trip planned to get off the continent and get off the grid. And I've been doing that for probably 5 or 6 years now.
Where's your
And do what?
next trip?
Yes, for a music festival. And so I will go and I will enjoy it, and I can look forward to it. It's something that I just know is there and it's going to happen. But I love music. I love getting outside. And my apartment doesn't really get a whole lot of light. I mean, I know that's great for some people, like, but also,
It's beautiful, but I know what you mean. It's not a very well lit space.
yes, yes. And so that's why I'm at my office today because I just had to get out. But I feel good when I get out and I walk or I just do something outside, even if it's shopping, just something to get out and moving and around people. But also that's me, right? So I'm an extrovert through and through, and I need to be around people even if I'm not engaging with them necessarily. If I am shopping, I mean, I'll make a friend somewhere, or I'll at least talk to someone, and it's just very healing for me. I feel it in my body, the difference that it makes in me. And
I
so
I really appreciate you talking about how much you feel it in your body because I think a lot of us ruminate. And so we know we're anxious because we're having the thoughts. I know you and I have talked about this before. I don't ruminate. I know I'm anxious because my stomach hurts or
Yes.
my shoulders are tight. And so something like a massage, even though it sometimes feels like an extravagance, I know it's not because it's actually repairing that physical where the anxiety is sitting physically for me.
Right. Yeah, I know. My mom says I was born with a stomach ache, and it is true. I mean, I can sit here and tell you that I don't stress. Like, I mean, I even people
Yeah.
told me I had anxiety, and I would go to therapy for it, and my therapist was even like, I don't think you have anxiety. And she's the one that taught me, like, okay, so instead of you dealing with the anxiety that in the way that other people do, whenever you do have some unusual pain or some unusual tension, then ask yourself, what is going on in my life right now that might be bothering me? And that is how I have to deal with it. Like like I don't have as much awareness to it as my unconscious does. And so when I feel those things, I do stop to be like, huh, what do I need to do differently? And that's what finally got me into therapy was I was starting to just like I was noticing these movements I would have only when I was typing up a report for these torture cases. That was the only time I would have this tension and I have to like stretch and these movements and like shoulder stuff. And if I wasn't doing those reports, I wasn't feeling that way. And then I thought, okay, so this must be really bothering me. This must be getting to me more than I am aware. And so that's when I started doing the therapy. But yeah, it's not really just one thing. It's just paying attention to your body. And I am very mindful of my body. And so I pay attention to that and I do what feels right for me. Now, I do have the benefit of having no one to answer to and no one to take care of. And so I realize not everyone has that option. You know, I mean, you can still feel that you need something and pay attention to it and tend to it in some way or another. It might not be a therapy session or a massage, but maybe go for a walk, something like that, that even the kids or the partner that you have or whoever that you have to take care of can be a part of, you know, but just doing something, changing the environment up a little bit.
It's funny you mentioned the unconscious piece of it because I know one of the ways I know that I'm anxious is I start having nightmares about something bad happening to my dogs.
Yeah.
And especially if I have more than one, it immediately stops me to be like, okay, something is bothering you. You have to check into whatever that is. It usually has nothing to do with the dogs. That's just my brain's way of signaling me that something is off.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just something that's like very important to you. Yeah.
So, in the little bit of time we have left, I want to talk a little bit more about mental health. I know offline we've talked a lot about your diagnosis of ADHD, how that came about. I also, in my experience, I think you have a very typical path of a high achieving woman who did well in school until you got to a certain level and it started interfering. And that's how it was highlighted for you. And I noticed that a lot, and especially women. But I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit about what it's like, especially to be a therapist who has to be in situations where you can't move around a lot and you can't go off on a tangent. And how do you manage all of that and taking care of yourself?
Yeah. So I wasn't, so to be clear, I wasn't great at, so my ADHD really affected me growing up. I just was able to recognize it. I couldn't articulate it, but I recognized it. And I put in these supports throughout my schooling that worked.
And I didn't mean to imply that it didn't impact you, but I think that's
Right.
a typical experience of high achieving smart people, like innately kind of set up some structure for themselves until it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah. So in school, I I guess also had the power of persuasion because I would just assign someone to be my tutor. I would go into class and I'd be like, you're gonna be my tutor this semester, and I would literally scoot my desk up to them where we are touching, and I'm like, you're gonna help me with this class, okay? And they'd be like, all right, and they would just do it, right? And so because I was able to do that, I was in I was in what we called honors classes. I don't know what they call them everywhere else, but in high school, like that was, honors classes was there, and I did that, and the only way I got through those was because someone would tutor me because my brain, I would be everywhere else. Like I was, they were able to field my questions and also hear what the teacher was still saying so that they didn't get behind. But I was always very behind. And then like in elementary school, it was just easy. I mean, I was always in trouble. I was always having to write lines for talking or dancing in class or, just all the random things that I thought everyone did. And that actually lasted much longer, as you know, Joy, than it should have. Anyway, so there was that. At one point in elementary school, it got to the point where I was measuring my progress by the amount of exclamation points that was written behind the mess that
So
my
the funniest
teacher
thing I've ever heard.
that my teacher wrote my parents, right? And I'm like, hey, we're down some exclamation points, guys. And so anyway, so there was that. But then yeah, so like as you mentioned, as I got into like junior high and high school, I assigned myself tutors. Like I didn't need anyone else to do that for me. I just did it myself. And so so I made it through like that. And people, anytime I wanted someone to study with me or help me, they would. And we would have a good time doing it. And I think that also, the more I learn about this neurosequential model of therapeutics, like knowing that you have like downtime while you're learning is also very helpful in your consolidation of memory. I was automatically doing that because I would get distracted. And so we would learn, I would distract everyone, we'd have a good time and we'd get back to it. And so it was helping our consolidation, right?
Was I your tutor in Dr. College? Is that how I just like put that together?
So it was also happening then. But anyway, so then I get to college and I guess I can share this. I do not recommend this, but I got into like the wrong crowd and started doing drugs. And it was the first time in my life I had ever gone to class. And the drugs were an amphetamine in my coffee. And it was the first time I'd ever gone to class in my life and actually heard what the professor was saying from start to finish. And I sat there and listened and understood it and was like, no one told me you have to be on drugs to get through school. I was the last to find out, and I was really mad at everybody, thinking everyone else is on drugs. That is how you do this because
The only way you could possibly be
right.
this focused.
Yes, yeah. I truly, I had to have conversations with people. Like, are you on drugs? Is that how you do this? Because it literally was the first time I'd ever been in class from start to finish and heard what was going on and knew what was going on at the end.
Kind of a funny story, but at the same time, like, what a failing of the system
Yeah.
to allow it to get to that point for you, where that was the first time you had some relief.
Yeah. It's almost like they didn't know what to do with a female class clown. It wasn't the same, And so, but I was the class clown because, well, and so then I get to grad school and my first master's degree was simpler. So it wasn't as difficult, which I think really prepared me for the clinical degree. So I already had like this practice round, So I get to my clinical doctorate, and I was already prepped and ready, so that it wasn't so much information all at once for the first time. It was
You
a second,
scaffold. Yeah.
yeah, and then I was doing well. I do think I was doing more. I was having to do much more to do the work and to get the work accomplished. I mean, I felt stupid all the time. I felt like the dumbest person in class. And everyone like I got pulled out a couple times by my professors, one of them being the dean, to ask me about what's going on in class. And I had no idea what they were talking about. And eventually one of them was helpful and asked me, do you feel like when I ask a question in class, do you feel like other people get there before you do? I'm like, yeah, I have no idea. Like, do you send out the questions and I don't get them? Like, I don't know how people get to the answers so quickly. And she's like, okay, so she gave me an example of a question and she said, think out loud. I want to hear your process out loud, how you get to the answer. So I got to it and she goes, okay, do you think it takes everyone that long? And I said, no, it definitely does not. And so she was like, right, you have all the information in your head. You have to like seriously like work through it to get there. And I was like, yeah, Then so we set up a way for her to start a question and like signal me that she's going to be calling on me. So it would let me get there. But so when she asks the question, she can call on me and I can feel like I've contributed. Well, then it was also the same professor who pulled me in her office after a test and was like, you did just as well as anyone else on the multiple choice and that kind of thing. But let me show you your essays. And when she showed me my essays, I was like, those aren't my essays. I didn't do that. And she was like, these are definitely your essays. And the writing was all on the sides. It was everywhere. And it looked like a child wrote it. Like it was. So then we decided that maybe I have anxiety, right? I know I don't have anxiety. But that was like the third person who told me I had anxiety. So I go to my counselor who says, why are you here? I'm here for anxiety. I don't think I have it, but that's what people keep telling me. And so she was a specialist on anxiety. So after a few weeks in, we revisited it. And she says, okay, what do you think? Do you think you have anxiety? I said, no, I never thought it. She's like, I don't think so either. Then she says, I think maybe you have ADHD. And I was like, no, I don't. So then we talk about it for a little bit. I take it back to friends and colleagues at school.
Conversations I've ever had before.
And so without finishing the question, I ask, hey, y'all think I have ADHD? And literally before I could finish the question, you know this, you were there. All of you were like, yeah, hello, you didn't know that. Well, I did not know that. And I thought all of you didn't know what you were talking about. So, but then you all gave good examples as to how maybe you know what you're talking about. And so then I realized that maybe I have ADHD. I still worked with my therapist. I didn't want to go on medication or anything like that. So I was like, I want to work with my therapist on what I can do. And so we go through all this, and I realized in this one session, we're talking about it, and I'm telling her everything I do. And she's like, no one does that. And I was like, what are you talking about? So I sit in the back of the class, and I trace people's figures. I back and forth, like their bodies. If they're looking at me, I trace their glasses, the rims, or the shape of their nose, like whatever. But I'm tracing everything. When you're doing that, you don't hear a lot of what is being taught to you. So I was like, but everyone has issues with that, you know? And the therapist was like, no, they don't. People don't do that. So that was when I learned that people don't do those sorts of things. Some of the techniques we used, was sitting in front of the class, whatever, which was helpful, but it wasn't as helpful. And so I finally agreed to get assessed for ADHD.
And how old were you at the time?
Let's see, that was 20.
Must have been 27, 28 ish.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you're saying the age 27, 28.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because I
yeah,
started, I was about 25, and you're a year and a half older than me.
yeah, right. And the interesting thing, though, is if you go back to my childhood, you can see it very clearly.
Oh, it's crystal clear.
Yeah, I mean, it is very clear. And just no one knew what to do with me. And so they didn't, right? But I think that was part of why I just always had to be going. And I couldn't stick with anything. Everyone in my family is like an expert on some sort of musical instrument. I'm not. I couldn't handle it. Like, I was like, don't sit me down at a piano. I can't deal. But like, I didn't enjoy reading until I was older. I didn't, and I could actually do it. But like, I just couldn't. I just thought I was very different from everyone. I really thought I was stupid. In therapy, in my doctorate program, she had to help me see where maybe I wasn't stupid. Like, you're working on your fourth degree now. I'm like, well, sure, but and I was like, I think I just sort of like luckily got the ones before, but I truly had internalized this idea that I was not smart. I was never going to make it. And with those internalizations, I'm now finally here. And so I don't know how I've made it because I'm not supposed to be making it. And it's a very confusing time. But yeah, so I was about 27, 28, and I got assessed, and it was like, yeah. So I started medication. I didn't tell anyone. And I was so mad because people kept asking me if I was okay because I wasn't moving around, talking, engaging everyone in class. I was just sitting there, humdrum. And so for a little while, I was like, I don't even know if I want to do this because it makes me so boring, but it also makes life so much easier. But I will never forget like being able to do things at home and not spoil stuff. Like, I would leave cartons of ice cream out, or like leave the lid of the washer open so it never actually washed the clothes. It just sat there in water. Or like, you'd be in the middle of learning something, and all of a sudden I would realize I'm learning the Gettysburg Address. For what? I don't even know. Like, that wasn't part of my studying tonight. I was making magnets one night and like realized it was almost like I was dissociating. Like, I was like not truly dissociating, but when I finally like realized what I was doing, it would be like, why am I doing this right now? Like, this is such a distraction. But it was just like this, I don't know, this train my brain would just take me on. And that was all prior
I
to
can tell you
being
from
there.
my experience, I never find you boring when you're on meds.
Well, that's good.
I find you able to sit still.
Hmm.
Um, And I mean, even the times when we would go out and you weren't on meds, I remember I would call you every 15, 30 minutes to make sure that you were staying on track because I knew that if I didn't, I would show up and you would still be sitting in your towel doing something completely irrelevant to getting
But
ready.
very important, right?
Very important, always very important.
Gosh, yeah. I mean, it was a nightmare. It was chaos living in my brain. And it took everything in me to get to where I was. And I think a lot of my driving force, a lot of my motivation was the independence, the need for independence, the need to be on my own, the need to, I don't know, just be accomplishing something. But it was a struggle. It was a big struggle. And yeah, the only way I can do therapy and sit there and hear what's going on is with medication. And I wish that weren't the case. I hate to even say that out loud, but it is. I mean, it's just all there's to it. And it also makes me irritated when I hear people and they're like, "Oh man, I want to stay up all night. Does anybody have Adderall?" And I'm just like, that is not what it's for. Like, it's not. And I feel like people think that's why I take it, and it's not. I mean, I sleep very soundly at night, but like, it's really hard for me to get over that stigma. But it is what it is, and that's what I have to do, or I would not be as good at this as I am if I weren't able to focus and I weren't able to concentrate. But yeah, I wish I could do that more naturally.
Well, and that's just how your brain's wired.
Yeah, but yeah, everything. I mean, just I could name so many things that from childhood that still afflict me to this day that are indicative of ADHD. But it also helps me understand too. I think I've had a lot of different experiences in life. I think just because the paths that we're on, like, we can use all of it to enrich our understanding of people, and to really learn to accept them as who we are. Like, my did dabble in drugs, I did have to do that, but I understand now, not knowing what I needed. Like, oh wow, that helped me learn what I needed.
Right.
It helped me to function. It helped me to be productive, and so I can understand kids these days who feel like I felt. And I can understand parents not wanting to put them on that. And I can understand all of those different things and relate to that in some way or another. But I've just accepted every part of my past as like something that has helped build who I am today, and get me where I am today too. Because I surely never would have believed that this is what I would be doing someday or one day. But I love it. My parents are certainly proud of me. They did not know did not know I would ever become anything. So they are beyond belief. But yeah, it's really been an interesting journey, but it's definitely been a journey that I never could have imagined.
I know we're kind of heading towards the end of the time here. I have some questions I just like to ask everybody as like rapid fire wrap ups. Now, they're not truly rapid fire. You may take a minute to think about them, and you may also have more than one answer to them. All is acceptable.
Okay.
What do we not talk about in this field that we need to talk about more?
Ooh, what do we not talk about that we need to talk about? Like in psychology in general?
Yeah, and usually I give these people ahead of time, but I totally forgot to send them to you. Sorry.
Can I give you like an answer to a question that's sort of that? Okay. So I'm not sure exactly what we don't talk about enough, but I know in the field of trauma, I think we aren't correcting the misuse of terms as much as we should. I think just because something is distressing does not make it a trauma. Just because someone is not paying attention to you does not make them narcissistic. Just because someone hurts your feelings does not make them gaslighting you. Like, I feel like there's so many terms that are being misused and mishandled. And I do think more attention needs to be drawn to that. And I guess the only reason that comes to mind is because those terms come up for me when I'm on the stand. They think, well, they needed more attention as a child. Wouldn't you say that's traumatic? And I'm sitting here talking about PTSD, and it's like, what?
Right.
That is not traumatic, And so it's like, so I have to do a lot of explaining. And then it makes me think, what are people thinking about their lives, and how much are they maintaining that as a standard for what they expect from people? Like, if you hurt my feelings, you're gaslighting me, and so it's toxic and we should not be together. It's like, instead of communicating, we're putting labels on things that we might not be accurate. And so I think that we could spend more time explaining those concepts a little bit better and more thoroughly.
There's like an extreme that actually inhibits communication.
Yes. Yeah.
What do you think of the phrase trust the process?
That phrase used to make no sense to me. It was just bonkers. However, I do think there is some merit to that. And I do think there can be real richness to it. I used to hate when people would tell me that. But I think trusting the process, for me anyway, it's really shown up a lot in my own life. Like, I've not understood something that was going on right then, and I wanted to know right then what was happening, and I wanted to control it or change it instead of just letting it be. And so I think trusting the process, as long as you know what process you're supposed to be trusting and like what that actually means, it can be very helpful, and it can help you to be patient. It can help you to take things as they come, and it can help you to just remain in the moment instead of focusing so much on what should happen or what could happen in the future.
But what is one book that has significantly impacted your growth as a therapist?
Ooh, that's a really good question. It would have to be, can I say an author? So you either love him or you hate him. I think you hate him, but Yalom.
I don't hate him.
Okay.
Yeah. He was not in my top
Yes.
But I don't hate him.
I think of him because I was always told I'm doing it wrong. I was always told I'm saying it wrong, I'm doing it wrong. Everything was wrong. And he kind of let me know that you can say things in a way that aren't the way you were taught to say them. As long as you do it in a way that is helpful to the client, right? You can say things, you can do things, you can be off script, you can be off like this therapeutic track. Like you don't have to sound therapeutic all the time because that's just I'm not good at that. I'm not good at sounding therapeutic. I'm good at just being
Oh,
me. You
right
know,
here. Yeah.
yeah. And so I think he is one. Um, as far as like um, someone not necessarily psychological.
Next question. Like, what's your favorite
Yeah.
non-therapy?
Okay. Malcolm Gladwell is another author that I just love, and he's a reporter, but he writes things that are research based too. But he really does challenge your perspective, and he does throw in a lot of behavioral analysis. He throws in a lot of psychologists in the mix, but it's very just like a reporter sounds. But he talks about very important issues. He talks about them from different perspectives, and he comes at it from angles that you wouldn't necessarily expect, and it has taught me a lot and opened my mind to a lot of ideas that otherwise I wouldn't have considered. But I don't know that there's one book because I constantly read. Now that I can sit and read, I constantly read, and so I would say that those are the two that stand out the most to me, though. One in psychology and then one in not. Other than like my favorite from childhood, Dr. Seuss.
Anything that I didn't ask that you feel like it's important people know or that you just wanted to share?
I think what was most helpful to me is knowing that you know yourself better than anyone else, and throughout your journey, people are going to tell you what you should do, what is best for you, and what you should not do. The issue with that is they are not you. And so I would just encourage everyone to continue to follow what they feel is right for them, what they know is right for them. And if they make a wrong decision or if they make a mistake, then just pivot and keep moving. We all make mistakes. We all need to pivot. So I would say consider others' opinions, but don't value them more than your own. And I think that's what I would like to leave with people.
Yeah. I think that's a really important piece of like you know what's going on for you.
Yeah.
It's okay to change, it's okay to develop insight, but you also know what you need.
Right. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm glad we were finally able to do
I
this
know. We chatted about it for a minute.
for a while. Yeah. So thanks for nailing it down for me.